Deep beneath the Himalayan mountains on Terra, the Emperor of Mankind kept a golden host. Before the galaxy burned in civil war, the Adeptus Custodes served primarily as artisans, scholars, and companions to the Emperor. They were immaculate demigods, pristine and unblemished by frontline combat. They were kept close to oversee the Emperor's most guarded secret, the Imperial Webway Project. For millions of years, the alien Eldari used an extra-dimensional labyrinth called the Webway to cross the stars. The Emperor intended to hijack this network, building human-made conduits to bypass the warp, the volatile alternate dimension heavily relied upon for interstellar travel. This diagram shows the architecture of that ambition. On one side, we have material real space. In the middle, the swirling predatory storms of the warp. The Webway tunnel cuts a clean, shielded path, bridging through the turbulence. By moving human transit out of the warp and into the Webway, humanity would starve the chaos gods of the emotional energy they feed on. At the height of the Great Crusade, the Emperor left the front lines entirely, returning to Terra to focus his efforts on this subterranean project. He entrusted the military conquest of the galaxy to his sons, viewing the physical expansion of the Imperium as a secondary objective to the construction of this psychic sanctuary. That absolute safety was compromised by a single warning. Desperate to alert the Emperor of impending treason, the Primarch Magnus used forbidden sorcery to project his consciousness across the galaxy. To reach Terra, he smashed through the Emperor's delicate psychic warts. Magnus's intrusion acted as a sorcerous explosive. It instantly shattered the fragile, human-built sections of the Webway conduits. The metaphysical dam protecting the tunnels from the surrounding Immaterium simply evaporated. With the psychic shielding gone, the vacuum of the labyrinth drew in the surrounding warp. An endless, violent tide of demonic entities flooded instantly into the compromised corridors, killing thousands of Imperial workers in the initial surge. The demonic horde now had a direct, subterranean highway pointing straight at the Imperial Palace. At the end of that highway sat the Golden Throne. If the entities reached that terminal point, the rift would detonate, tearing Terra apart and dragging the entire solar system into the warp. By trying to save his father's empire, Magnus accidentally created a direct pipeline to hell. Humanity's greatest architectural triumph instantly became a fatal structural flaw. To hold the line, the Imperial defenders advanced into a ruined section of the Webway known as Callistar. This ancient Xeno-city was constructed with non-Euclidean geometry. It existed in 360 degrees, built into a spherical cavern where stairwells twisted endlessly, and gravity shifted depending on your orientation. The Imperial forces were forced to adapt this elegant, impossible architecture into a brutal war zone. They hammered crude steel barricades and gun emplacements directly into the alien stonework, creating defensive choke points across bottomless chasms. Manning these barricades was a highly specialized coalition. The Adeptus Custodes formed the vanguard, supported by the cybernetic Mechatronicum armies and the nullifying Sisters of Silence. But the chaotic geometry favored the invaders. Because gravity and direction were entirely subjective, demonic entities could manifest and attack from the ceilings, the walls, and underneath the bridges simultaneously. Standard Imperial phalanx formations were entirely useless. The labyrinth itself actively worked against the defenders. The Custodes found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't count, in a maze they couldn't map, sacrificing highly trained demigods just to hold a few meters of shifting stone. The defense of Callistar evolved into a single, continuous engagement, lasting 1,825 days. For 5 years, the meat grinder never stopped. This chart compares the starting force of 10,000 custodians against the invader. They had no reinforcements. Beneath them, the red area tracks the demonic horde, an infinite, constantly regenerating mass pouring in from the warp. As the golden line descends, it records a constant daily loss. On average, 4 to 5 custodians died every 24 hours. Because each custodian is a unique, genetically handcrafted warrior requiring decades to create, The Imperium was losing its most valuable assets faster than they could ever be replaced. Over 5 years of continuous combat, the survivors physically and psychologically deteriorated. Their pristine auramite armor was shattered and caked in rust and dried blood. They fought in a state of terminal sleep deprivation, swinging their weapons by pure muscle memory. By the time the final retreat was called, the arithmetic had taken its toll. 90% of the custodian guard, 9,000 men, had been butchered in the dark. The defenders killed tens of millions of Daemons, but the kill ratio did not matter. When a finite force of perfect warriors is locked in a cage with an infinite enemy, perfection will eventually bleed out. Kalistar finally fell. The surviving Imperial forces, crippled and exhausted, began an agonizing fighting retreat back down the tunnels toward the safety of the Golden Throne. To prevent their total slaughter, the Emperor of Mankind left the Golden Throne. He strode onto the battlefield himself, projecting a blazing aura of psychic fire that vaporized thousands of Daemons in seconds to cover his army's withdrawal. But the Emperor's arrival drew out the apex predator of the warp. Amidst the slaughter, he was confronted by a unique demonic entity known as Drachnion. Drachnion was certainly not a typical Daemon. It was born from the conceptual echo of the very first human murder. Because it was fueled by the innate violence of the very species the Emperor was desperately trying to protect, no physical force or psychic fire could actually destroy it. The Emperor could not destroy a creature formed from the very human instinct for murder that he sought to transcend. With the breach widening and his most powerful weapons proving ineffective against the warp's conceptual nature, the retreat became permanent. The Emperor tore the Daemon from his own body, forcing it to take the shape of a jagged sword. He then summoned his most loyal tribune, Ra Endymion, and rammed it into the custodian's chest, binding the indestructible entity inside Ra's living flesh. Ra did not ask for an apology. The Emperor gave him one final hollow command: run. He ordered Ra to sprint into the deepest, most isolated reaches of the Webway, putting as much distance between the Daemon and Terra as possible. Alone in the dark, bleeding and carrying the weight of a god's failure, Ra turned and ran into the labyrinth. He would be hunted forever by the entity trapped inside his own soul. With the Daemon exiled, the Emperor returned to real space and sealed the Webway gate. To ensure the demonic tide could never push through, he had to sit upon the Golden Throne, using his own mind to hold the psychic doors shut. The secret war was over, but the cost was absolute. The Emperor lost 9,000 of his greatest warriors and the only viable path to human ascension. Instead of guiding humanity into a psychic golden age, the Master of Mankind chained himself to a chair to guard the ruins of his own failed dream.